Man, I can't believe the dream that I had last night. I was laying, it's hard to remember, but I remember being in the dream, kind of like, I think, waking up from a dream. And as I was sitting there, I remember feeling an LSD trip coming on in the dream. And it was kind of fishy to me because I know I didn't eat any LSD in the dream. I was saying to myself, like, am I tripping? Did somebody slip something in my drink or whatever? And then the more I was thinking that, then all of a sudden I started tripping more and more and more in my dream. And I remember feeling and seeing a real trip, LSD, shrooms, whatever, in my dream. I was tripping in my dream, and it was exactly like a trip would be in normal life, except I was like that in my dream, and it was a speaker, some craziness in tongues or something, but I understood him, and it was like about life and beyond. Man, it was crazy. And like, I remember it, man. I woke up feeling it. Like, I dreamt that I was tripping, but it was realistic and intense, and it still resonates with me.
We must have a high tolerance for chaos. Learn to embrace the flow.
Forgive all that we can't forget. Regret nothing we can't let go. For despite what we have learned, infinitely more we do not know.
So let us tune our frequencies
until new vibrations grow. Let's pretend that it never ends.
And now, it's time to start the show.
Welcome to the Opus Marcus podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Aurelius. You are the audience, dream trippers lost in the eternal flashback of now, and this is episode 16. So the last time I did an opening monologue was about 2 episodes ago, roughly 2 months ago, mostly because I'm way too self-conscious for this shit, and it seemed easier just to go right into the conversations. I just haven't mastered the full extemporaneous, without any breaks or mistakes, ums or ahs or likes or any of that shit, so it's gonna be a little choppy. Alas and alack, folks, I actually have shit to share with you, so let the chopping together of the good bits begin. So I was at my friend Noli's last weekend for his 40th birthday celebration, which we call Nolmas. So it was the 40th Nolmas, and you might remember Noel. He was a guest on episode 9. It's one of the best episodes I've done so far. But anyway, he's writing a chapter, apparently loosely based on me, for his book that will never be published, called Panopticon. And the character's name is Mr. Langostino. Mr. Langostino is a school teacher by day and a podcaster by night, so to speak. And Noli didn't write this part yet, but he said the next part of the chapter is going to be Mr. Langostino going home from work to finish working on the podcast that nobody listens to. So first of all, I want to say, since I am pretty sure he's not listening to this and will not listen to this, Noli, touch my ass and balls and go fuck yourself. And secondly, I would like to announce that the new official motto for the Opus Marcus podcast is the podcast that nobody listens to. Okay, moving on. So, my goal is to get 2 of these babies out before the end of 2017. This one is going to be a hodgepodge episode, so come along for the ride. Next episode, I have an awesome guest that I can't wait for you to hear. And it's going to get even more exciting after that because, well, just go back to the beginning of this podcast, before the opening music. The person talking about tripping inside of his dream was my brother Mike, And if you're a regular listener that never listens to this podcast, because don't forget, nobody listens to the Opus Marcus podcast. So my brother has been dropping us some recordings in the last few episodes, and when I fly down to Florida for Christmas to see Mom, I'm also going to see Michael for the first time in 3 years. The last time we saw each other was at our father's funeral. The first time that all three of us will be together in the same location will be 3 years since my father's funeral. And I'm going to record a standalone podcast with just Michael to go deep into his life, because let me tell you something, my brother came so close to the bottom of the well. I don't know if he hit rock bottom of the well, but he came finally close enough to start scrambling up towards the light. And with him it was like the frog in the well, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. With Mike it was like, please Mike, just stop taking 2 steps back, like just stay still for a second. We'll worry about the 1 step forward when it comes. And folks, that moment has come. Michael has taken more than 1 step forward, and I can't wait to talk to him face to face. Okay, so I'm talking about Michael. Let's just jump right back into some of the backlog recordings I have of Mike. I'm just going to chop them up and put them together nice and quickly, and then we'll move on.
Fuck, man. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I stand in line at Dunkin' Donuts because I want my fucking, macchiato with an extra turbo shot. I'm dead tired, and I stand in line for 10 minutes, these motherfuckers, just from to tell me, I don't have any turbo shots. Fucking kidding me? Bastards.
You guys aren't going to believe this one. I might have seen it all this time, but you know what? It's never all. It's never, it's always something else. And this is something else. I've got the name Tiffany in front of me, right? This is how it's spelled. Tiphani. Phani. I don't know. I don't know. I find this hilarious, but somewhat disturbing. It makes you think, does the person who actually put this on the birth certificate, did they do it to be creative, which I guess would be cool, or did they do it because they can't spell? I see a lot of names like that. Like, maybe it's just, the parents are trying to phonetically sound out what they think the name should be, how the name should be spelled, or they're trying to do some creative shit. Either way, some of these names, and you know what, I'll make this a recurring theme here on this show. If I see, whenever I see a crazy name or a crazy spelling, I'm gonna let you guys know about it to give you guys a little laugh. All right. So to be continued. I don't understand that. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
This man started calling me.
But you called from here.
I'm running after the car, wondering why he's pulling away.
This man
Es que yo por eso te digo, ella no me figuraba a mí, solamente me figuraba a Michael.
Michael y yo.
Sí, nada más.
Let me ask this man, talk to him.
So you don't believe to
Ma'am, I want you to please leave me alone.
Okay.
Hello? Hey, is another Jose came in a Toyota Corolla, and I thought it was you, and I'm in the car with him. You won't believe it. He's another Jose, same as you, in another car.
But he's an Uber driver, not a Lyft driver.
Right, and I asked him though.
And the Lyft have a sign over there.
Okay, sir.
Oh my God! What are the chances of that? Mon phenomenal. Okay, well he doesn't even know where you're going.
And we don't know where you're going. Where are you going?
Ma'am, I asked you to please stop it. I mean, really. I'm going southbound. Please, ma'am. It's only bad. I've been working all day on the phones. I can't take it.
Yeah, but you don't let me tell you that you don't.
Ma'am. Okay, but ma'am, please, it's not right what you're doing. Just please.
Yeah, you do. But where are you
This
going?
lady will not stop. I mean, come on now.
All
The
right.
man keep calling me.
Come on, so I'll get along now.
Michael,
Yes.
Michael, can you ask her where she's
Jose,
going? Because
hello?
she don't want.
Well, you're gonna get dropped off first. So, actually, I think I'm gonna get dropped off first. Matter of fact, I'm positive I'm getting dropped off first.
Ella para dónde va?
Yeah.
Ese es el problema, ella le estoy tratando de decir
You know,
para dónde va y no me quiere decir. Se pone brava.
I'm in
recovering right now, and I just want to like go get a drink or something.
La próxima vez.
Exacto, para y le pregunta, ¿dónde tú vas?
Que llame a otro.
Man, I wish I knew what you guys were saying.
¿Qué tal hubiera estado buscando marido, ah?
You gotta make a left here.
Nicolette?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Let her deal with the other driver, the other Jose.
No, but listen.
I'm listening. What?
He don't want to hear me. She don't want to hear me.
I know.
But he don't know too much English, so you can ask her where
Okay.
he's going.
Here's the thing. Well,
Because he don't know where he's going.
I can be of assistance, or I can just hop out the car right now.
Don't hop out, Mike.
And run down the street screaming.
Don't do it, Mike. Please, just let torn out.
No, I know. Because it's too far of a walk where I'm going. I don't want to do that. All right. Aside from that.
He wants to know where he's going.
Man,
Okay. Where exactly?
You see?
Where exactly are you
Mira,
going?
Jose asked her, where are you going?
She
That's
said she's
it.
going south.
Where are you going?
So
That's what you start doing.
me
Where are
and
you
you.
going?
I'm going southbound.
Who's
Where
on
are you
first?
going?
Southbound.
Okay.
No, I thought
where?
who was on second?
That's not the address.
No, what's on
O
second?
sea, no es la dirección.
Well, then who's on
Sir,
first?
is this your wife or somebody?
No, yeah, I'm going with him.
That's your wife. Who is she? Because
Yeah,
she
I'm the
really,
wife.
because one thing about
Well, okay, he needs to know where you're going.
Ma'am, please
Ah.
stop it because you're getting on my nerves.
Okay, so she's not even on an app.
Sí, porque mira cómo ella no quiere que yo le pregunte.
Okay, so,
Y
all right.
grita, entonces,
All right, we're gonna-
ella que está mal, no yo.
I'll get dropped off first, you get dropped off second, and then she gets dropped off third because we don't know where she's going
She
yet.
ain't getting dropped off. She
Yeah,
rolling
yeah.
with him.
You're staying in the car with him?
Drop off Michael
I pay
and drop off.
I pay.
Okay,
You
then.
don't pay to him.
No, but I'm saying, are you getting dropped
Man,
off
I
though?
can pay. Don't mind. I'm gonna pay. Just leave me alone. Damn, I gotta get off at the Walmart. Shit.
That's where I'm going. Well, I'm going like.
Ella quiere ir para
I can
Walmart.
go shopping and
Al
everything.
bueno de allí, allá hay uno.
Oh,
Ahí se
God.
paga y no te paga.
Look at this
I can
traffic.
give him cash money. Shit don't matter to me because she getting on my damn nerves. And I just got to Walmart because she getting on my damn nerves.
Wow, this traffic's horrible.
It sure is. It's Friday.
Not a car.
I'd be better off walking.
No.
No, I would though.
It's too hot, baby.
I know.
We've been on the phone all week long.
I
We are
know.
mentally drained.
You're not kidding. My brain's. I'm like a zombie.
That was quite an entertaining Uber ride. So putting together all the Michael stuff took me Friday night and some of Saturday. And what took me all day Sunday was what you're about to hear. A story for the holiday season. One of my favorites. Recorded with music for you. And it's called A Santa Story. You'd be surprised how much room there is in a chimney. Santa Claus slid through the sooty cylinder like its surface was a water slide. I clumsily clambered downward, hands, knees, and spine jammed against the grimy brick. Just let go and enjoy the ride, he echoed from the blackness below. I figured, what the hell, it's Santa Claus. It's not like he would let me die, again. So I let go and felt the grating ash on my backside. Suddenly, a force pushed upward against my body. I could feel my jeans getting extremely warm, but my upper half was freeze-burned, scraped, and stuck. Ho ho ho! The silly bastard laughed at everything. He laughed exactly the same way every time. It never got old. I felt grips around each of my ankles. Santa yanked and I emerged through flames into a cozy, hobbit-sized room. You know, hobbits originated from a dwarf elf half-breed, Santa said, catching my thought. He reached into the fireplace and pulled out a steaming clay pot. Tea? He poured hot, steaming purple tea into a reindeer mug, and his nose lit up red. He then produced 2 bottles, one green, one clear. As he poured both of the entire bottles into each of the mug's antlers, I read the labels. The green was absinthe, and the clear was sake. They dribbled and mixed into the tea, which hissed and bubbled for a second. I took a sip and felt the warm, delicious drip hit me. I smirked. So, what are you? Some lame secret agent or something? Nope. Just a spirit, loosely manifested by the myths of various tribes and religions, Santa said. He leaned back in reverie. "Those were the good old days," Santa said. "I could take whatever form I wanted. The rituals were real, nothing at all like this commercial nonsense. That's why I went under glacier." My mind flashed to right before this story started. We had been flying for hours in his giant sleigh, sipping hot cinnamon chocolate from a couple of snowmen mugs. As we approached, I saw what looked like a small chimney sticking out of the Arctic ice mountain below. Smoke was rising from it, and I thought I could even smell peppermint, and sugar cookies, and fresh pine. Santa slapped me on the back and said, "Hey, what did one snowman say to the other snowman? Smells like carrots. Ho, ho, ho." Then he confessed, "I stole that from Lost. Great show. Hurley has me over to the island every now and again for his annual Dharma Christmas party. Ha! More like samsara, if you ask me." I simply stared at him. "That's a Buddhist joke, kid. Pay attention." The sleigh took a dive as the reindeer turned in unison and hovered just above the chimney. "I had to disappear," Santa said as I shifted back to the present. "Shit got weird. The old myths either collapsed or grew corrupt. What they did to Saturnalia was pretty awful, but really, Jesus had it worse. I mean, there are actually ashtrays with the face of Jesus on them." Santa conjured a long wooden pipe from inside his breast pocket and placed it onto an ashtray with, sure enough, an engraving of Christ's face, crown of thorns and all. Santa opened a fist-sized sack containing what looked like miniature Christmas trees. Each one glittered like bright garland and wafted a familiar wintergreen fragrance. "Here, I've got something special for you. The candy cane pipe." The cane was about the size of my forearm, carved out of thick peppermint bark. He demonstrated how to hold it upside down, gripping it just above the curved end. He generously packed the bowl that was carved into the outer stem. I placed the curved end to my lips. A spark, and peppermint puffs erupted from the top of the cane. Random whirls of red and white hovered and swirled together. "I call this my sugar plum stash," he said, "because it puts visions in your head." His laugh seemed stretched on a wah-wah pedal. It contracted and elongated and was almost visible. Then he took a hit from his wooden piece, which had a jolly totem face carved into it. As he exhaled, a smoky wreath formed a halo around his head. His expression suddenly turned serious. "You know, I didn't always look like this," Santa said. He took another hit while I studied his scarlet garb trimmed in fluffy white. His shiny black boots with gold buckles rested comfortably on an ottoman. That blushing ochre face seemed perpetually amused and slightly bemused, a subtle distinction only Santa Claus could pull off. When he exhaled, the smoke seemed to dance across his beard like morning mist rolling away across a field. "It was that damned cartoonist Thomas Nast. He's the one who drew me in this ridiculous getup. How did I know it was going to stick? I went through thousands of years existing in multiple thought forms until this one image became the Saint Nick. Next thing I knew, it was the end of the 20th century, and I still looked the same. The grown-ups remembered me, but they had stopped believing. Then the corporation stepped in and relegated me to commercial deity. They would keep the kids hooked long enough to make them viable consumers, and then castrate their sense of wonder like they did to their parents before them." Santa took another hit, held it in, grabbed his reindeer mug, and swallowed the entire contents in a single gulp. He closed his eyes, slowly exhaling purple smoke through his nostrils and mouth as he clutched his fist over his heart. "But it was a kid that finally broke me," he said gravely. "Randy Vendrusky. He was the brightest kid I'd seen in a century, and it wasn't a dim century. Too bright. Too soon. By first grade, he was already a pariah amongst his peers. You were once a teacher. I'm sure you can guess what that led to. Bids for attention, I replied. Precisely. He pulled all kinds of stunts, some of them now legendary. Mind you, he never hurt anyone, but he toyed with everyone. It was his way of dealing with those who had hurt him emotionally. His poor parents had to attend weekly school board meetings to discuss the Vendrusky problem. They had given Randy as much love as any parents could give. Finally, I was called in as a last-ditch effort. Unfortunately, by then, I had fallen off the sleigh. I was questioning my own meta-existence and not coming up with any answers, a miserable shell of the spirit I had once been. But I went to the school, and I met with the kids' parents and teachers. I listened to their complaints and desperate pleas. What did these people expect? Did they really think that I could undo the damage that they and their precious social institutions had wrought? What was I going to tell this kid? It's all so fucking real? I'm not even sure I'm real anymore.
Cookie, dear?
A grandmotherly voice startled the sudden silence. From the light of the brick fireplace, a pair of oven-mitted hands held out a tray of gingerbread cookies. Mrs. Claus stood there, smiling benignly. I had forgotten this guy was married. As my fingers grasped its torso, the gingerbread man giggled.
Ooh, that tickles,
it squeaked. Mrs. Claus nodded, indicating a bowl filled with frosting. I dipped it, and the gingerbread man exclaimed,
creamy.
Mrs. Claus raised her eyebrows, as if daring me to do it. A bit disturbed, but not wanting to be rude, I raised the cookie to my mouth and bit into the gingerbread man. His head and arms flailed from my lips as he shouted, Yummy! Go on, dear. Sorry to interrupt, said Mrs. Claus to her husband. Thank you, wife. Anyway, they all wanted me to tell them what to do about Randy. And you know what I told them? I shook my head. I told them, tell him there's no such thing as Santa Claus. Why would you say that? I asked incredulously. Well, I said that if they let the kid in on their little secret, then he might be more cooperative with the adults. Some argued that he was too young, but in the end I got my way, if only because they had no other options left. When they told him I wasn't real, he was honestly shocked. As smart as that kid was, he still bought into the manufactured myth. And the truth was too much for him. He figured that if the adults could lie about that, they could lie about anything. They were never to be trusted again. But why would you do such a thing? Because there's a greater purpose, elf, Santa rumbled and pointed his finger into my chest, that you have yet to understand. Besides, Randy Vendrusky learned a valuable lesson that day, one that most people never learn. What's that? You don't have to believe in everything, just believe in something. So, what happened to him? He was bitter for a long time. Then, in his senior year of high school, some of the kids caught up a bit and suddenly found him fascinating. To entertain them, he began creating his own myths. That was the point, you see. If I was going to go the way of the dodo, I'd better first arm these kids with the best present ever. Imagination.
Boy, did that rile the New World conspiracy,
Mrs. Claus interjected. She stood next to her husband, who reached his arm around her waist. His eyes twinkled at her. It sure did, Santa said. But for the most part, the governments leave us alone as long as we keep exporting magic for things like iPads and video game systems. That's not magic, I protested. That's technology. Do you know how your iPad works? He asked. Not really, I admitted. Then it's fucking magic. Trust me, Without it, their gadgets would be useless. Where do you think the phrase ghost in the machine came from? So basically, you sold out and the kids are doomed, I stated flatly. Nah, son, the kids are all right. See, that Vendrusky was just one of many seeds that the other local deities and I have planted. In a few years, unparalleled earth changes will occur, and the time will be ripe for a takeover. But what about the children? Don't you see? Santa smiled merrily. They're the ones who will give me new form. They will define and refine the new myths so that the Great Spirit can continue to nourish future generations. That's why we need you, dear, Mrs. Claus interjected. Her spectacles sparkled in the flickering firelight, hiding the eyes which felt caring and kind. Yes, yes, Santa nodded. He pulled out a huge scroll of parchment, unrolled it, and scanned with his finger. Mortimer Snerd, you were very naughty, my boy. By the way, I don't think fooling around with two sisters counts as a threesome if they don't fool around with each other. Mrs. Claus looked at Santa disapprovingly. I'm just saying, he scowled. Anyway, the fucked-ocalypse is almost upon us, and the end is imminent. Despite your dirty soul, you have remained extremely eminent among the humans, your former species. So congratulations, you are now one of Santa's elves. He must have seen the consternation on my face because he quickly added, Oh, don't worry. This is a cake gig to prep you for full-blown angel work. You can't go fixing dimensional rifts or raising planets to Christ consciousness without paying some dues. On the other hand, there are many perks to being an elf. We have an Olympus-sized whirlpool, and you get a nice long blowjob every time you complete a mission, said Mrs. Claus enthusiastically. Plus, there are plenty of she-elves who would love to have you kiss them under their mistletoes. Ho, ho, ho! Good one, wife, Santa chortled. And another thing. No lame outfits with curled shoes or jingling bells. And for God's sakes, get a haircut. From now on, your motto should be, stay relevant. Now, he glanced once more at his list. You were definitely not meant for factory work. Besides, I only need a skeleton crew there anyway. Fuck toys. You'll be assigned to a team and do field work. For 10 months, you will find a way to inject joy directly into their hearts. No bribery, no lists, and no child left behind. Let them discover the truth on their own. I don't care what your methods are. You can give them LSD-laced LCD implants or do funny dances for all I care. Just get them prepared for my return. And when will that be exactly? December 25th, of course. I laughed out loud. It was all just too ridiculous. Check your calendar, son, he said calmly. That's 4 days after Time Wave 0. Shit's about to get real. I hope you're ready. I was about to reply that my recent resurrection made me born ready, but then the giant corporate Christmas bots attacked, and the glacier split wide open. It reminded me of Krypton exploding in the first Superman movie. Luckily, Santa has a secret space fortress where we regrouped before establishing a new North Pole on the Saturnian moon Iapetus. As for me, thank God the reality shift occurred, because I look more like Legolas from Lord of the Rings than one of those claymation elves from the 70s. Plus, I have superpowers. At the polar bear roast on Nolmas, Santa gave a big speech about how the children are our present or some such nonsense. Part of me suspects that he's just making the whole thing up as he goes along. But with full health benefits and all these sweet perks, who am I to question Christmas? The end. Okay, that was fun. Let's just keep it going with another Christmas piece. Now, hold on, hear me out. This is the last of the Christmas pieces I've written. So, unless I write another one, this will be the last on this podcast. It's shorter, it's much darker, and it's called Woe Christmas Tree, Woe Christmas Tree. Prologue. There are so many things about Christmas that piss me off that if I tried to list them all, it would already be next Christmas. Let's first establish some context. I'm referring to the Christmas holiday as it exists from whenever the first person or persons who decided to physically cut down a tree and put it in their home, to right now, which as I write this, is December of 2016 in the United States of America. Of course, having a decorated tree inside the home is not a cultural practice that's confined only to the US. Anywhere in the world that someone has a Christmas tree, it's either plastic or a real tree. Pause. I could stop right here and rewrite the whole piece to argue why we don't need any kind of totem in our homes to celebrate Christmas. Then I could expand outward and tell you why we don't need this kind of Christmas, or any kind of Christmas. Why waste my time, though? Who the hell is going to stand on the side of the line against the spirit of giving, the belief in cherished myths, the lies we must tell our children because they still believe in the truth we've forgotten? What business or institution would dare pump anything other than every artist in history's version of a Christmas tune through their speakers? What about those poor drones sleeping in tents in Amazon warehouses across the country, their waking life an elvish nightmare of delivering our goods on time under the banal enslavement of a corporate overlord? No, I dare not be the one to defy the Christmas spirit, which manifests eternally in our universal consciousness. That hope for peace and unity of giving and forgiveness, when we embrace our fellows with the joy which signals a new year, and always a new choice. No, we can't get rid of Christmas. If we do that, something crucial to our collective consciousness dies, and apparently we can't survive without it. I won't hate on Christmas, but I will hate on Christmas trees. For the record, I use a plastic Christmas tree. I'm fully aware that this tree, like the plastic one my family had used at least since I was born, will one day go in the garbage, ultimately ending up in some landfill or ocean. Nevertheless, I'm fairly optimistic in that I believe we'll eventually clean up our act and planet, so those remains won't be too much of a blight on my karmic record. But you know what is? Murder, i.e., unintentionally or willfully causing the death of a living entity. I hope I don't have to explain to you why plants are alive, nor should I have to cite the plethora of substantiated data that plants communicate, alert each other of danger, and broadcast pain signals. I guess you could try and debunk me on the definition of pain, so let's take pain out of this equation. Imagine you're a tree. You're out there in nature, you're home, growing, supporting other forms of life, sustaining off the gifts of earth, water, air, and light. You grow. You continue to branch out into the world from new perspectives. You die before you die and are reborn again, until at last all the seeds you have created are gone. Your purpose fulfilled, you will one day melt into the oneness of this living world. Except that one day, a human machine slices you from the center, severing you from your root structure, the fungal baseline of communication with all of your kind. You are beaten and dragged, carried to a camp where you discover dozens like yourself, suffocating zombies, surviving only by eating yourselves from the inside out. During this slow death, in which you feel no pain, you are brought into a prison that cuts you off from the very sky, a chamber made from the flesh of your own kind. They decorate you with empty light, hang false idols on each of your limbs, and they crown you with a star that you can no longer even see. Under your rotting corpse, they place offerings and sacrifices to a god you do not know or even understand. They feed you stale water that keeps you alive long enough to fulfill your purpose. A deathly mold dissipates from your skin. Your only solace is to know that they are breathing in your dying gasps.
And it will sicken them.
Now, imagine that same scenario, except with pain. Throughout the ordeal, you never once complain. You don't ever doubt the purpose of your existence. You knew before you manifested as plant consciousness that you were called to serve. You naively believe that you are fulfilling your role as a tree. In that final moment, when at last the sweet piney scent of pure death arrives, you forgive them, for they know not what they do. Suddenly, the seed of awareness blossoms. You are the Christ in Christmas. It is accomplished. Epilogue. As I read this piece to my girlfriend, she remarks, "Doesn't a tree die as soon as it's cut?" "No," I reply. "That at least would be merciful." In other words, stop putting real trees in your homes, you monsters. And Merry Christmas. Okay, next up we have the main portion of our feast of self-indulgence, and that is a 5th grade interactive read-aloud of a novel called The K by Theodore Taylor. The K is a historical fiction novel that takes place during World War II, dealing with themes of survival and trust and racism, but I'm also including it here as an example of how to read to your kids and how important it is that you are reading novels along with them and asking them the kind of questions that you're going to hear me ask my students, because it's those little pauses in between the lines of text for discussion when the higher order cognitive thinking truly takes place. For the record, I've done extensive editing on this so that you can hear the student responses, which are brilliant, and also all names have been removed to protect the innocent. And after listening to this, if you don't think teaching is an art form, well, try to imagine that this is only an hour of what I do for about 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I also want to go over just the basics. So this story takes place during which time? Raise your hand. World War II. So do you remember the specific year that this story starts in?
It starts in 1614.
Seriously? Absolutely not 1614. We get to say it again. Wrong!
Oh, we can
Yes! 1942. Very good. 1942, middle of World War II. Now, where?
In Willemstad?
Willemstad. Well, Willemstad is the capital of... What's the island? Curacao. Very good. Where is Curacao located? Where is Curacao located? It is next to Aruba. So then where are Curacao and its sister island Aruba located next to a larger landmass? The Caribbean, yes. Where specifically in the Caribbean? No, south of Cuba.
Russia?
No, Russia's on the complete other side of the world. We're talking about the Caribbean Sea, which is between North America and South America. You said Cuba, but that's too far north. Where is the island of Curacao located in the Caribbean? It's off the coast of a country in South America.
Virginia?
Virginia's in the United States. We looked at this on a map, and I don't want to pull the map back up right now. Say it again. Venezuela. Thank you, Chino. The country is Venezuela, which is in South America. Curacao is just off the north of that country. Do you remember seeing that on the map?
Yes.
This story opens up in Willemstad. Willemstad is the capital city of Curacao. Now, Curacao is important in the war. They're not fighting in the war, but why are they important in the war? Why are they important as an island? Harshly.
Because they are giving gas to other gas and
He's right? He's got it. They're sending fuel, which comes from, say it, oil refineries on the island. That fuel is shipped over to which area? Not the United States. Europe. Very good. Now, what side is fighting the Germans? They're called, all the countries fighting the Allies. Very good. So that's where the fuel's going, to the Allies in Europe. Except what's the problem?
when they go into water, they get the other tanks are waiting on the water and it's true.
Okay, kind of. Can we be a little more?
When they send out boats,
They send out those oil tankers. What happens?
then there's submarines under and we blow them up.
Whose submarines are under the water that wants to blow up the Germans? Okay, very good. Now, which of the two islands, Aruba or Curacao, had an oil tanker that was blown up by submarines, German subs? Which of the two islands, Aruba or Curacao? When the story opens, Gia? Aruba. But everybody on Curacao is freaked out and on lockdown because they've
Saw a tank on shore.
not a tank. They saw a submarine off the shore. Okay? Now, we have our main character's name is
Philip.
and his family is from
Virginia.
Virginia. They're down on the island because his dad,
Is a oil refinery worker. He works for the government.
yeah, he works for the government. He works in the oil refineries. So that's why he's needed down there. What's the deal with Philip's mom?
She doesn't like black people.
She doesn't like black people because, well, she's racist because she comes from
The
the South in the what year did we just say we're in? 1940s, okay? So she's from the 1940s. There was still segregation and racism. So that's where she comes from. Now, are there African Americans on the island of Curacao?
No.
Well, what colors then? Why is she? What color? What dark-skinned people are there on the island?
The natives?
The island natives, very good. They're called the West Indian natives or West Indies natives, but even that's not entirely accurate. So yes, the island natives. They're not African. Some of them might be from Africa originally, but not all of them. They're there, and who else is on the island? The Dutch. Very good. Why are the Dutch on an island in the Caribbean? Because the Dutch come from Europe. What are they doing on an island in the Caribbean?
They had set up colonies there.
They had set up colonies there. Look how much we've learned already. And we haven't even gone back to the story yet. Okay, so it starts out with Philip and his best friend Henrique, and they're playing, and everything's weird, and the soldier tells him, why are you standing on the bridge? Because a torpedo could get you. We got blackout curtains, right?
Yes.
And Philip's mom and dad are kind of, but are they like loud fighting? No, they're just not getting along because she's not happy to be there, right? And dad is called back to the refinery in case it gets hit and blows up, then he's got to be there to put out the fires. So that's where we're going to pick up, okay? And this is the moment where Philip and his mother are leaving the island. Why are they leaving Curacao?
Because Philip's mom, she actually doesn't like she doesn't feel safe in Curacao.
Uh-huh.
So what you would call her mother, she forced him and her to go back to Miami, but they are in Panama to make a stop for a call, and now they were 2 days after they left Panama, they got torpedoed.
Oh, wow, nice summary. Okay, he covered everything, covered all the important details. That's good. He remembered that they're making a stop in Panama, and then they're going to Miami. But 2 days after they left Panama, what happened? Torpedo. Now that was the first sentence of this chapter, but I thought it would be cool to read it yesterday as a little teaser, right? Cliffhanger. Hashtag teaser trailer. I forgot what I was going to say. I completely forgot.
Brain fart.
Brain fart. You're right. I guess. Oh, torpedoed by who? German submarine. Okay, very good. What's another name for those kinds of boats? They call them. Say, U-boats. Very good. Okay. Now, you asked me yesterday if, because I told you that Curacao is real, and Wilhelmstad is a real place, and World War II, and all that. The SS Hato, I looked it up one year with a class. The SS Hato was a real ship, and I believe that it was actually torpedoed. So this event did happen. Now, was there an actual boy named Philip on board? No. That part is fiction. That's why we call this realistic fiction or historical fiction.
There might be.
There might have been. Yeah, there might have been some guy named Philip. Yeah, probably. All right. Now remember, who else do you see on the boats and on the islands?
You see on the boats on the islands.
Who do you see?
You see other people that are traveling.
What kind of people?
Dutch people.
The Dutch, but who else?
American.
The natives. Now these whole group of islands are called the West Indies. Because remember, Columbus thought he discovered India, right? And so he called them India. Well, these are known as the West Indies. So these are the West Indian natives, okay? Who are also on the ships. Most of them are workers, okay? They work the ships, the schooners. All right, chapter 3. We were torpedoed at about 3 o'clock in the morning on April 6th, 1942. 2 days after leaving Panama. I was thrown from the top bunk and suddenly found myself on my hands and knees and on the deck. We could hear the ship's whistle blowing constantly, and there were sounds of metal wrenching and much shouting. The whole ship was shuddering. It felt as though we'd stopped and were dead in the water. My mother was very calm, not at all like she was at home. She talked quietly while she got dressed, telling me to tie my shoes and be certain to carry my wool sweater and to put on my leather jacket. Her hands were not shaking. Pay attention to that character detail about the mom. She was all nervous and anxious and neurotic the whole time being on Curacao, right? Now, the worst has happened. The ship has been torpedoed, and she's remaining completely calm. Looking at me like, huh? Would you want to explain that?
I think she knows it's gonna happen, or she knew it would happen, so she has a plan.
She has a plan because she knew it was going to happen? I'm not sure she probably thought it could, but I don't think she really wanted it or knew it was going to happen.
She actually didn't want to freak out because then she wouldn't want Philip to like freak out also. If she thought if I stay calm, I could keep him calm too, and we could safely get off this ship.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, you want your kid to stay calm, so you have to stay calm. People in a crisis sometimes go one way or another. I've seen it in people. Sometimes in a crisis, people suddenly are totally calm, on their game, thinking straight, you know, they can handle the situation. Other people, when a crisis occurs, they just lose it. They become useless, you know. It's too much for them. And there are different kinds of people in the world. When you have a crisis, when you are faced with a crisis in life, it'll be a good way for you to find out what kind of person you are, and whether you like it or not, or want to change it. Okay? Let's move on. She's staying calm, though. She's probably freaking out inside, though, right?
Yeah.
She helped me put on my life jacket, then put hers on, saying, "Now, remember everything that we were told about abandoning ship. The officers had held drills every day." As she was speaking, there was another violent explosion. We were thrown against the cabin door, which the steward had warned us not to lock because it might become jammed. We pushed it open and went out to the boat deck, which was already beginning to tilt. Everything was bright red, and there were great crackling noises. The entire after part of the ship was on fire, and sailors were launching the lifeboat that was on our deck. Steam lines had broken, and the steam was hissing out. Heat from the fire washed over us. When the lifeboat had been swung out, the captain came down from the bridge. He was a small, wiry, white-haired man, and was acting the way I'd been told captains should act. He stood by the lifeboat in the fire's glow, very alert, giving orders to the crew. He was carrying a briefcase and a navigation instrument I knew to be a sextant. On the other side of the ship, another lifeboat was being launched. Near us, 2 sailors with axes chopped at lines, and 2 big life rafts plunged toward the water, which looked black except for pools of fire from burning fuel oil. Try to visualize that, because oil does not mix with water. If you ever have seen oil in water, it makes little bubble clumps. So if gasoline and fuel from the ship is leaking out into the water, that gasoline is going to sit on top of the surface of the water in little pools. Well, gasoline burns very easily. So you can literally have burning gasoline on top of the water, where it looks like the water is burning. Because the gasoline is so thick that it's burning on the top, but it's touching the water on the bottom and not burning. Does that make sense?
No.
Yeah, so you have to try and visualize. Yes?
Like putting oil in the water and having fire, wouldn't that have kill a lot of animals and wildlife in the sea?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah, the oil in the water is bad for sea life, definitely. Yes?
Couldn't they just have torpedoed the lifeboats?
They could torpedo the lifeboats, but I don't think it was that accurate, or that they would waste time. That was a good one. They wouldn't waste weaponry like that. You know, their job is take down the ship, and if there's a couple survivors, that's not a big deal, right? Okay, moving on. The captain shouted, "Get a move on! Passengers into the boats!" Tins of lubricating oil in the afterholds had ignited and were exploding, but the ones forward had not been exposed to the fire. A sailor grabbed my mother's hand and helped her in, and then I felt myself being passed into the hands of a sailor on the boat. The other passengers were helped in, and someone yelled, "Lower away!" At that moment, the Hato lurched heavily, and something happened to the boat falls. The bow tilted downward, and the next thing I knew, we were all in the water. I saw my mother near me and yelled to her. Then something hit me from above. A long time later, 4 hours, I was told, I opened my eyes to see blue sky above. It moved back and forth, and I could hear the slap of water. I had a terrible pain in my head. I closed my eyes again, thinking maybe I was dreaming. Then a voice said, "Young boss, how are you feeling?" I turned my head. I saw a huge, very old Negro sitting on a raft near me. He was ugly. His nose was flat and his face was broad. His head was a mass of wiry gray hair. For a moment, I could not figure out where I was or who he was. Then I remembered seeing him working with the deck gang of the Hato. Now, why do you think he uses the term Negro and refers to him as ugly? Why? What's the reason for that?
On the cover it shows him and Philip and maybe he thought that he was ugly.
Why would he think he's ugly? Okay, but you're on the right track. And help her out.
He thinks that he's ugly because he's racist, because he lived in the South and in 1942 there was still segregation and they referred to blacks as Negroes.
Do you hear what she said?
Yes.
Did you hear that? Okay. Because he comes from a segregated South, where they still refer to black people as Negroes, and where he didn't spend a lot of time with them, right? They were always segregated. And so in his mind, where did he get all that from?
His mom.
His mom. Yes?
I think there's a different reason.
Okay.
Because aren't the Scooters look just like them?
The who?
The Scooters,
the guys on the schooners?
Mm-hmm.
Do they look just like what?
Just like the man that was described in the story.
Okay, so what's your point?
My point is that maybe because maybe he isn't ugly and maybe something's wrong with his eyesight. Because I've heard that anytime you get hit like something really hard on your head and you've been knocked out.
So you're saying that he looks ugly to Philip because Philip's eyesight's messed up? No, I mean it's an interesting idea, and you are making a foreshadowing, but when he says he's ugly, that's an opinion that he's making based on his prejudice against black people. Do you understand? Okay. All right. I looked around for my mother, but there was no one else on the raft. Just this huge Negro, myself, and a big black and gray cat that was licking his haunches. You know what the haunches are? It's basically the part right under here. Your haunches. Who has a cat at home? That's it? You guys all have dogs. Well, dogs do it too. Dogs lick their haunches. It's disgusting. You ever see cats and dogs lick themselves? Yes. That's why he said haunch. Okay, shh. The Negro said, "You are the most terrible crack on the head, boss. A strong back glance often your head, and I hurl you aboard this raft." Now I see the looks on your faces. And you're going, what? Huh? Okay. Why is the author purposely misspelling what this character is saying? Why are we reading this going, you add a most terrible crack on the head, boss? What is that all about? Why is he doing that?
Because those natives don't know exactly that much about how to speak English, and the author wants to express how the Native American spoke, and because the natives aren't speaking English that well.
Okay, so they don't speak English the same way, right? They speak kind of a broken English, and it sounds a very certain way. So when an author is writing something and they want you to really hear that character's voice and the way they speak, they'll break the rules and write the way the character speaks so that you can kind of hear it in your head. Does that make sense? Okay, that's what's going on here. And the whole book is like this for this guy. And you're going to become very used to it.
Weren't African Americans they weren't educated?
Yeah, they weren't educated, exactly. So the English they know they picked up just from hearing it around, okay? And of course they have their own language, so what we call it's a dialect, an accent. In English they have a certain accent that they use.
Isn't he a native of Curacao?
Well, we don't know that. We know that he's a native in the Caribbean area, and we know that he was on the boat that left Curacao, but we don't know where he's actually from. You know, the natives, they move around all the islands. If you work on a schooner, you're going to go from place to place to place. So he's probably native of the Caribbean, but whether he's actually born on Curacao or from Curacao, we don't know that. Yes?
I think he's not from Curacao. I think he's from Panama. Because people who on that stuff, people might have got off.
Yeah, when they stopped at Panama, on and off the ship. He could have come on then. Yes. Sounds Jamaican? Yeah, I'm definitely doing that kind of accent for him. Okay? Alright, so let's go. He crawled over toward me. His face couldn't have been blacker or his teeth whiter. They made an alabaster trench in his mouth. Alabaster means bright white. And his pink-purple lips peeled back over them like the meat of a conch shell. He had a big welt, like a scar, on his left cheek. I knew he was West Indian. I had seen many of them in Willemstad, but he was the biggest one I'd ever seen. I sat up, asking, "Where are we? Where is my mother?" The Negro shook his head with a frown. "I true believe your mother is safe and sound on a raft like this. Or maybe they hurl her onto the boat. I true believe that." What's he saying? What's he saying?
His mom is probably safe and sound. And
That's
on
it.
the raft that is riding on, or maybe she went and her back onto the boat.
Perfect. Okay, good. Then he smiled at me, his face becoming less terrifying. "As to our very location, I must guess we are somewhere around the Cays. Somewhere maybe 15 latitude and 80 long. We should have passed them till that most treacherous torpedo split the very hull. 2 minutes down at the most." So what he's saying there is that we must be somewhere around the Cays. Now we know that Cays are, what are Cays? Say it. Yeah.
Overbuilt sand.
Yeah.
That turns into an island.
Okay, so it's an island. Yes, exactly. And he said we should have passed these islands, except that our boat was torpedoed. And how long did he say it took the ship to go down? 2 minutes at the most. I looked all around us. There was nothing but blue sea with occasional patches of orange-brown seaweed. No sight of the Hato or other rafts or boats, just the sea and a few birds that wheeled over it. That lonely sea and the sharp pains in my head and the knowledge that I was here alone with a black man instead of my mother made me break into tears. Finally, the black man said, looking at me from bloodshot eyes, "Now, young boss, I most feel like that my own self, Timothy, but 'twould be of no particular use to do that, eh?" His voice was rich calypso, soft and musical, the words rubbing off like velvet. And what's he saying there? He says, "I most feel..." There you go. He's like, "I feel that way too, but no use crying." All right. What's his name?
Timothy.
Timothy. You just learned his name. I felt a little better, but my head ached fiercely. He nodded toward the cat. "This is Stu, the cook's cat." Get it?
Yeah.
Whose cat was it on the ship? The cook. That's why the cat's name is...
Stew.
Stew is like a soup, right? Stew. Okay. "This is Stu, the cook's cat. He climbed on the raft, and I had no art to throw him off." Stu was still busy licking. "He got oil all over himself from the water." You get that?
Yeah.
I looked closer at the black man. He was extremely old, yet he seemed powerful. Muscles rippled over the ebony of his arms and around his shoulders. If you don't know, ebony means black. It's the name of black, the color black. Ebony. The skin, I looked at his hands and feet. The skin was alligatored and cracked, tough from age and walking barefoot on the hot decks of schooners and freighters. He saw me examining him and said gently, "Put your head back down, young boss, and rest a while longer. Do not look direct at the sun. 'Tis too powerful." I felt seasick and crawled to the side to vomit. He came up beside me, holding my head in his great clamshell hands. It didn't matter at that moment that he was black and ugly. He murmured, "This be good. This be good." Philip is doing what? He's throwing up. He's vomiting. And Timothy is holding the head for him while he vomits, saying, "This be good. This be good." Right? Vomit. Good to get it out. Right? That's what he's saying. Get it out. This be good. What is he saying when he says young boss? What's he calling him? Not young boy. It's exactly what it sounds like. No. Boss. Young boss, he's calling him. When it was over, he helped me back to the center of the raft, saying, "'Tis most natural for you to do this. 'Tis the shock of having all this most terrible thing happen." I then watched as he used his powerful arms and hands to rip up boards from the outside edges of the raft. Pay attention to what he's doing and try and see it in your mind's eye. Visualize it, okay? That's what makes this story interesting, is actually seeing. He's taking off pieces of wood from the edges of the raft. He pounded them back together on cleats, forming 2 triangles. Then he jammed the bases into slots between the raft boards. He stripped off his shirt and his pants, then demanded mine. I didn't know what happened to my leather jacket or my sweater, but soon we had a flimsy shelter from the burning sun. So try to imagine this. If I just draw quickly this diagram on the board, if they're on a life raft, he takes the pieces of wood off from the sides, he arranges them into basically 2 triangles. They can drape the clothes over top, and they can lay underneath, and that protects you from the sun's rays. Do you understand?
Yes.
Crawling under it to sprawl beside me, he said, "We have rare good luck, young boss. The water keg did not bust when the raft was launched, and we have a few biscuits, some chocolate, and the matches in the tin is dry. So we have rare good luck." He grinned at me then. It makes sense? Yes? He's saying the keg of water didn't get destroyed. We have biscuits and dry matches. I was thinking that our luck wasn't so good. I was thinking about my mother on another boat or raft, not knowing I was all right. I was thinking about my father back in Willemstad. It was terrible not to be able to tell him where I was. He'd have boats and planes out within hours. I guess the big Negro saw the look on my face. He said, "Do not be despair, young boss. Someone will find us. Many schooner go by this way, and this also be the ship track to Jamaica and on." After a bit, lulled by the bobbing of the raft and by the soft, pleasant sounds of the sea against the oil barrel floats, I went to sleep again. I was very tired and my head still ached. The piece of timber must have struck a glancing blow to the left side. So a piece of wood from the ship as it went down smacked him in the left side of his head. Okay? That's why his head hurts now. When I next awakened, it was late afternoon. The sun had edged down and the breeze across us was cool, but I felt very hot and the pain had not gone away. The Negro was sitting with his back toward me, humming something in calypso. His back was a great wall of black flesh, and I saw a cruel scar on one shoulder. Yes?
What does calypso mean?
Calypso is a type of music that originates from the islands. It's a type of music, and it has a certain number of beats and rhythms and patterns to it. Okay? I asked, "What is your name?" Hearing my voice, he turned with a wide grin. "Ah, you are back with me. It has been lonesome these very hours." I repeated, "What is your name?" "My own self? Timothy." "Your last name?" He laughed. I have but one name. 'Tis Timothy." "Mine is Philip Enright, Timothy. My father had always taught me to address anyone I took to be an adult as Mr., but Timothy didn't seem to be a Mr. Besides, he was black." And so you can hear there that is that's his racism coming out, okay? And the author's all doing that on purpose. The author wants to give you those clues. Like, remember, this is how Philip feels. He said, "I knew a Philip who fished out of St. John, but an outrageous man he was." He laughed deep inside himself. I asked him for a drink of water. He nodded agreeably, saying, "The sun do parch, He lifted a hinged section of the raft flooring and drew out the keg, which was about 2 feet long. There was a tin cup lashed to it. Careful not to spill a drop, he said, "'Tis best to have only an outrageous small amount, just enough to wet the tongue." "Why?" I asked. "That is a large keg." He scanned the barren sea and then looked back at me, his old eyes growing remote. "The large keg have a way of losing its very size." What does that mean? The large keg has a way of losing its very size. What does he mean by that?
I think it means like even though that it's large, they still have a long time to go. So if they drink too much, then they won't have enough water for the entire trip till you get to an island.
Yeah, they have no idea. He says, it looks like a lot, but believe me, it has a way of going away quick. All right. And you can't drink ocean water, by the way, guys. It's salt water. It'll make you sick. If you drink too much of it, you'll get dehydrated. It will kill you. So don't think that because you're stranded on the ocean, you can just drink the ocean water. You can't. You have to have fresh water. So this is the only fresh water they have. You said we would be picked up soon, I reminded him. Yes, he said instantly, but we must be wise about what we have. I drank the tiny amount of water he poured out and asked for more. He regarded me silently a moment, then said, his eyes squinting, "A very little more, young boss." My lips were parched, and my throat was dry. I wanted a whole cup. "Please fill it up," I said. Timothy poured only a few drops into the bottom. "That isn't enough," I complained. I felt I could drink 3 cups of it, but he pressed the wooden stopper firmly back into the keg, ignoring me. I said, "I must have water, Timothy. I'm very hot." Without answering, he opened the trap in the raft and secured the keg again. It was then that I began to learn what a stubborn old man he could be. I began to dislike Timothy. "Young boss," he said, coming back under the shelter, "maybe before the night, a schooner will pass this way, and if that happens, you may drink the whole keg. Maybe the schooner will not pass this way, so we must make our water last." I said defiantly, "A schooner will find us, and my father has ships out looking for us." Without even glancing at me, he answered, "True, young boss." Then he closed his eyes and would not speak to me anymore. He just sprawled out, a mound of silent black flesh. I couldn't hold the tears back. I'm sure he heard me, but he didn't move a muscle of his face. Neither did he look up when I crawled out from under the shelter to get as far away from him as I could. I stayed on the edge of the raft for a long time, thinking about home and rubbing Stu Cat's back. Although I hadn't thought so before, I was now beginning to believe that my mother was right. She didn't like them. She didn't like it when Henrique and I would go down to St. Anna Bay and play near the schooners. But it was always fun. The black people would laugh at us and toss us bananas or papayas. She'd say, when she knew where we'd been, "They are not the same as you, Philip. They are different and they live differently. That's the way it must be." Now that's an idea that comes out of segregation. Henrique, who'd grown up in Curacao with them, couldn't understand why my mother felt this way. I yelled over at him, "You're saving all the water for yourself." I don't think he was asleep, but he didn't answer. Did you understand that? He yelled that at Timothy? Okay. When the sky began to turn a deep blue, Timothy roused himself and looked around. He said, with just an unfriendly glance at me, "If luck be, the flying fish will flop on the rock. We can save a few biscuits by eating the fish. Too, water is in the fish." What he's saying is, we can eat fish, and there's water inside the fish. So we'll actually be getting water that we need by eating the fish. I was hungry, but the thought of eating raw fish did not appeal to me. I said nothing. Just before dark, they, that means the fish, began skimming across the water, their short wing-like fins taking them on flights of 20 or 30 feet, sometimes more. Now, you've heard of flying fish?
Yes.
Do they actually fly? No, they jump out of the water and they can, the word is glide. Yeah, they can glide, he says, sometimes 20 or 30 feet. So what Timothy's saying is that some of those fish will jump out and land in the raft, and we can eat them. A large one shot out of the water, skimmed toward us, and then slammed into the raft flooring. Timothy grabbed it, shouting happily. He wrapped its head with his knife handle and tossed it beneath the shelter. Soon another came aboard, not so large. Timothy grabbed it too. Before total darkness, he had skinned them, deftly cutting meat from their sides. Deftly means skillfully, carefully. So he knows how to skin a fish, take out all the bones, get the meat, right? He handed me the 2 largest pieces. Eat them, he ordered. I shook my head. He looked at me in the fading light and said softly, we will have no other food tonight. You best eat them, young boss. With that, he pressed a piece of fish against his teeth, sucking at it noisily. Yes, they were different. They ate raw fish. Now I think that statement to me is almost hilarious. Because Timothy is saying, oh yeah, black people are different. Look, they eat raw fish. Well, it's not that he just ate raw fish. Have you ever heard of sushi? Yes. How many people have ever had sushi? How many people like sushi? Sushi is raw fish, and it's a Japanese custom. So to say that, oh, he's black because he eats raw fish is ridiculous. Philip is kind of ignorant. He doesn't realize that many people of all different races and colors eat raw fish. If you haven't tried sushi, you should try it. It's delicious. I turned away from him, over on my stomach. I thought about Curacao, warm and safe, about our gabled house in Charlevoix, and about my father. Suddenly, I blamed my mother because I was on the raft and with this stubborn old black man. It was all her fault. She'd wanted to leave the island. I blurted out, I wouldn't even be here with you if it wasn't for my mother. I knew Timothy was staring at me through the darkness when he said, she started this terrible war, young boss? He was a shadowy shape across the raft. Now what does he mean by that? When he says to Philip, he says, oh, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for my mother, Philip says. And Timothy's like, she started this terrible war, young boss? What does he mean by that?
She's asking, and he is asking if Philip's mother started the war.
Is he serious when he asks that?
No.
So what is he really saying by asking that question? He's being sarcastic. Think this through. Philip's on the raft. He says, I wouldn't even be on this raft if not for my mother. And Timothy's like, oh, she started the war? Explain.
Because he's saying that he's blaming his mother for being on the raft with him, but he's saying so she started the war because of the torpedo. If they wouldn't be on the raft if the war hadn't started, because then there wouldn't be any submarines that would be launching the torpedoes at them.
Do you hear what he's saying?
Yes.
Very good. It's excellent. Philip wants to blame his mother, but Timothy is saying the only reason that you guys were on the boat in the first place was because of the war. So unless your mother started the war, Philip, it's not really her fault. But he doesn't say all that. He just says, oh, she started this terrible war, eh? You know? Like, oh, it's your mama's fault? Because the reason they're there is really because of the war and the submarines and everything. Do you understand this little tiny joke here? All right, stand up and stretch.
best words, my best ideas come at the wrong time. No voice recorder around, or at least not fast enough to get it all. No paper to write it down. I'm usually in the shower or driving. And it's like the whole thought comes to you. And then when you want to go to write it down, there's a freeze, a pause, an inhibition, and suddenly it's gone. Like when you get in the mood to write something, you say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write something. I'm going to write this beautiful thing is going to come into my head. It doesn't work that way. You have to be receiving. You don't yank it from the source. It comes to you in its own time when you're ready. And when it comes, you have to do everything in your power to hold on to it and not lose it. Maybe our best thoughts weren't meant to be recorded. Maybe our best moments weren't meant to be remembered. Maybe some are not meant to make it into the physical world yet or ever. And maybe our best moments are best not remembered so that we don't compare the better moments to them.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening to the Opus Marcus podcast. Just a reminder that you can find this and all previous episodes at opusmarcuspodcast.com. You can subscribe to me on Soundcloud and YouTube and iTunes and Facebook. But it would be really great if you shared this podcast with others, and I sincerely thank you for your support. Okay, let's end this episode with something that's never before been heard on the Opus Marcus podcast. Well, it has. You've heard a bunch of different remixes of it as my background theme music. But this is the original theme song for the Opus Marcus podcast. It's called Awake to Sleep, parentheses, Opus Marcus, by Daniel Hall. Dan is a good friend of mine who a few years ago was messing around on his guitar in the basement. He said he was thinking of me, so he recorded this and gave it that title. And that's where the whole title of the Opus Marcus podcast comes from. So this is the original 13-minute long version of that piece. And fair warning, you got to make it through the first 3 minutes. The first 3 minutes are very cacophonous, rough, hard, abrasive, kind of like emerging from the womb into this reality. But fear not, because it all balances out into a peaceful bliss that should be perfect to listen to for whatever you might be doing right now in this moment. Thank you for listening, and here is Awake to Sleep, Opus Marcus.
oh, well, there's already enough podcasts. Like, who needs another fucking podcast? Like, who cares what you have to say? Rah, rah.
So much uniqueness and so much freedom in a podcast. You know, there's so many opportunities.
So, if I believe in something and it's fun to do, then just go for it.
We must have a high tolerance for chaos. Learn to embrace the flow.
Forgive all that we can't forget. Regret nothing we can't let go. For despite what we have learned, infinitely more we do not know.
So let us tune our frequencies
Until new vibrations grow. Let's pretend that it never ends.
And now, it's time to start the show.
Yeah, it's very powerful having a positive family, the power of the prayer, and God, plus the positive attitude. All those things mean so much that gets you through life.
We covered all the important stuff. That's right. So now let's cover the unimportant stuff.
It's a microcosm of all of the pain of the United States.
Ooh.
Getting his mood. We left on off on a specific thought thread. You don't remember where we ended it, huh?
I'm not sure I remember what I did yesterday. No, I'm just kidding. When you're in the moment, there's only this moment.
I guess tune in next time when I have some interesting shit to talk about. Other than that, I love you. I love the world. Peace out.
Sir, I avoid responsibility. That way nobody feels compelled to put me in a position of power.
Be excited, you know, because now it's here. Shiny gift of a lesson that you have in front of you. And now you know you have to work through it. You really have to, well, if you want to and you're tired of it, you have to work through it.
Why not? And give yourself, I would call it a dose of real reality. I mean, like where nothing makes sense but everything works.
Let's be real. None of this is real.
I feel like I'm telling a story.
What's your advice for people in life?
My advice is to stay strong, be helpful, be smart, be brave, be powerful, be kind, and be loving to everyone, even your pets.
People are like, oh, wouldn't you get lonely when all your loved one dies? Like, no, you get new loved ones.
You know, we really don't know what's in store for us. We really don't know.
Well, would you want to know?
Well, no.
No.
Let's say something bad happened to you. Move on. It already happened. Just move on to the better things in life.
I hope it's really not just us. Right? Everyone else is like, self-created eternal hell. No. Every waking moment is a joyous experience of growth and opportunity. I find myself totally spiritual centered and at peace with the balance between me and the rest of the universe.
What a heck of time!
After all that, they won the game.